Welcome. We're going to be taking a look at some transformations with algebraic expressions and just how to do some of the notation using kind of x and y, but also how to relate that back to its words and its picture. You'll notice a link here in these notes, as well as when you click on one of these pictures, those are also linked to take you to this tool over here, which is just a transformation tool, and it helps us where we can do the x and y algebraic notation, but we can also just do the geometric transformation tools as well. So let's look at this first one. It says move left 5 and up 3. So what I'm going to do is say that's the same thing as saying left 5 will be x minus 5, and y up 3 would be y plus 3. That's pretty straightforward, but now let's see what that picture would look like in the tool, and I'll replace the picture that's in here. So I want to take this object and transform it. There are a couple of ways I can do it. I could type it in here, x0 plus 3, or minus 5, pardon me, and y0 plus 3. And it would show me a picture that looks like that. And I could zoom in, screenshot that, and that would be just fine. So let's say that I wasn't sure how to do that algebraically and I needed some of the geometry tool to help me. So first thing I'm going to do is capture this, and I'll replace it here. But I'm going to show how we could have come up with that picture a different way. So if I click on this geometry object, notice that the menu up here changes. So I'm going to click on the geometry object, and now one of my options says transform. That's what I want to do, and I'm going to translate it. And now I want to translate it by this vector. So I'm going to click on this little vector there, and I need to move myself over a little bit, but I'm going to move it left 5 and up 3. And notice that's the same place where those black dot outlines are. So it says x plus negative 5, which is the same thing as x minus 5, and y plus 3. And that's awesome. That's what we were looking for. So translation, super easy to do. All right, let's do some of these other ones with like the reflection. So when I want to reflect across the x-axis, I'm going to see what that would look like here. And so I'm going to click on my object. And if I want to, I could step back just so my picture is clean and does not include the other stuff. You could also just refresh and it'll go back to its original state. That's another way to quickly and easily do it. I'm going to click on my object and transform, but this time I want to reflect across the x-axis. I'm going to click reflect, then I'm going to choose one of these lines to click on. Let's see if I can try that again. So I'm going to click this, transform, reflect. Oh, it wants me to do it across a line segment. All right, so I need to adjust the graph a little bit. But here's one way that we can do that quickly is I will put in some things in the reflection. So we have this line y equals 0, x equals 0, but instead we'll call it segment, and this segment will be 0, 0, 0, 0 to like 100, or actually we're going to go negative 100 to positive 100, comma 0. And that should give me a segment there. We'll make it nice and thick. Cool. So now when I want to reflect, this should be ready for you in your actual thing where you can click on this and reflect it across that line segment. And then we have it. Now, what's neat about this is no matter how I change this other shape, the reflected object has the same property. So when we want to reflect it there, that's one thing we can do. Now, what we could have done over here is in this x0 plus a number, y0 plus a number, we're not going to add anything to x and we're not going to add anything to y. But what happens when you flip across is that all the y values were positive before and now they're negative. So I just park a negative and boom, so negative y0 is all I need there. So reflect across the x-axis. That makes it xy goes to same x, but now negative y. And let's take a picture of this. Again, your graph will have those line segments set up so you don't have to take that little break that I did there in the middle. And I can take my picture and paste it in. Now if I reflect across the y-axis, I'm going to have the same kind of thing. L2 equals segment, and now we're going to have a couple of xy points here. We'll delete this, and this is going to have 0, negative 100 to 0, 100. And it shows up as red, but I'm going to keep it black and make it a little bit thicker just so it stands out, makes it easy to do those things. All right, so now I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to change this to my plus question mark, so I'm back at the beginning. And in fact, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save so that this turns into your original piece that you guys have. All right, so now if I want to reflect across the y-axis, I'm going to click on this object, transform, reflect, select this segment axis here, and now it goes across. How would we change that in our algebraic notation? Well, the x's become negative and the y's stay the same. So it's very similar to before. We would have negative x and regular y. Now let's take a picture of this so we can make sure we have this idea captured visually. So these are kind of a couple of shortcuts that when you want to reflect across the x, you just make the y negative. When you want to reflect across the y-axis, like horizontally, then you make the x negative. And again, no matter how your shape is drawn, it's going to have that reflection, even if it crisscrosses over the axis. So that's always something good to keep in mind. All right, now we're going to rotate. This is probably kind of the most intense level of trying to guess with this x, y, and what's happening to it. So I'm going to put my plus question mark, or here I'll just reload, and we should be good. Awesome. So I want to rotate. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on with this picture and how we can get an x and y to do something with a rotation. So I'm going to click on my object. I'm going to transform. I'm going to rotate. The point that I want to rotate around is the origin. We've been keeping it simple by rotating around the origin. And then it's going to ask me how much I want. Rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. 90 degrees counterclockwise is just a regular old 90. And so it rotated kind of in that direction. Now, how could I do something with x and y to make those move? Well, if I made them both negative, would that work? Nope, that's a 180 rotation. Okay, so if I made one of them negative, that's a reflection. But here's kind of the tricky move. You actually, I'm going to delete this x0 and put comma x0 there. So I'm going to swap them, which is an interesting thing. And then I'm going to make one of them negative. Let's see if it's this one. No, it's not that one. Then it'd be the first one. Now I have things lined up. So here's my tricky move. It's that this xy goes to negative y comma x. So the x and y swap, and the first one is negative. And then my picture, I'll take a picture over here of this, capture it, and paste it in there. So let's see what happens then in the other one. I think we actually kind of found it. So I'm going to change this transformation. Let's delete, not that there. I'm going to put a question mark in here so that disappears. I'm going to delete that, or I could have just refreshed the page again. And this time I'm going to click on my object and transform rotate. But I'm going to rotate 90 degrees in the other direction, which happens to be negative 90. Then I click go. Notice that I'm going 90 degrees clockwise. So 90 degrees clockwise. But what would I do to get there with my X and Y? So I'm going to do the swap again. I'm going to put Y0, comma X0. But I'm going to make the second one negative. And when I do that, I line up my black outline and blue shape, so I know that my algebraic notation is fitting the same as my geometric transformation there. So this becomes y comma negative x. And take a picture, capture that, paste it in there. Now I'm going through this rather quickly. I don't expect you to have the same speed. I do expect you to pause it as needed and then go back in and fill in the pieces where you need. All right, let's do the easy one. We probably should have started with this one, but let's do the easy one. So I'm going to refresh my tool, bring it back. Now when I want to flip, or not flip, but rotate 180 degrees, that's the same thing as a flip and a flip. Let's show that. So if I transform, and I'm going to rotate around that point 180, it says boom, now I'm pointing down. I notice that it's flipped left and right, and it's flipped up and down. So that means that a flip left and right is a negative x, and then a flip up and down is a negative y. So there we go. That means that xy just becomes negative x, comma, negative y. Awesome. Now I can capture this picture, fit it in here. We can get to some of our shortcuts. I'm going to make these pictures just ever so slightly smaller, so I can see all those shortcuts on one page. Okay, reflect across the x-axis. Well, if I go back a little bit, reflect across the x-axis is x and negative y. And reflect across the y-axis is negative x and regular y. Reflect across both axes. That's the same thing as a rotation of 180. It winds up being negative x, negative y. Which brings us to this. Rotate 180 around the origin. That's negative x, negative y. That was this one here. And let's see, 90 degrees clockwise. Clockwise was when we went down there. So clockwise is this one. And that's y negative x. And then counterclockwise is also a swap of y and x, except the y this time was negative. Okay, now what I want to explore is to try and see if we can do some multi-step transformations, or a composition of transformations, meaning more than one. And we're going to see what happens when we put these tools in here. So I'm going to say that x is negative and y is minus 3. All right, so what happened to get that? Well, to get that, the negative x flipped me across the y-axis, and the y minus 3 translated me down 3 units. So in my words here, I would say reflect across the y-axis and then translate down 3 units. And here's my picture of how that looks. So I capture it, I'm going to paste it in here, make it ever so slightly shorter, just so I don't lose extra space. Let's try looking at these other ones now. So negative x minus 2, so that's going to be a negative x. I'll put it right here in this part, negative x minus 2. And then it's not y minus 3, it's negative y minus 3. Okay, so the negative x flipped us in the x-axis, and the negative y flipped us in the y-axis. So we have a rotate of 180, and I'll show you kind of what seems to be happening here. Let's take that back. I'm going to click on this, transform, rotate around the center, 180. So it's like I went there, and then I translated 3 units to the left, or 2 units to the left. So I went to this, and then to the black. So that was kind of helpful to see it in 2 stages there. So I'm going to take a picture of that, of all of it, pretty much. So capture that, and paste it. And this was a rotate 180, and then a reflect, and then a translate left 2 units. All right. Ooh, this one's interesting. It has a swap with the y and x. Let's see what's going to happen with that one. I'm going to reload my screen, my tool. I'm going to replace my xy in here with this y plus 3 and minus x. So that means I'll have y0 plus 3, comma, minus x0. All right, that's interesting. It looks like I rotated and then maybe some kind of translation. So let's see what happens there. I'm going to take my blue shape and rotate it using the geometry tools, a negative 90. Okay, so it rotated and then it translated. So it looks like it rotated and it's here at 1 and it moves to 4. So the first thing it does here is it's a rotate 90 degrees clockwise. And then second, it translate right 3 units. And I can take my picture, show what's going on here, capture it, and paste it. Oh, no, here we go. All right. This one here where it says rotate 1, then translate left 2 units, that's actually just a copy of what we have up here. So I'm going to delete that row. It won't show up on your guys' pages. Okay, now we have some things that we want to try and match what's going on here. So when I click on this and I click edit, I can see the picture a little more big. And I'm going to reload my screen. And I'm going to try and transform the object, but also just to see like what we can do to create a similar one. So D goes to E, and D has these points down here in the bottom. It looks like there's 2, negative 4 is a point, and then at 3, negative 7, and then we have it go a little bit further over to 8, negative 3, and then these ones look like they're right here and right here. Yep, so there's this shape is now matching the same as figure D if I drag those pieces into the right places. And it looks like I have a rotate and a translate. It's hard to tell right away, but here's what we will see. I'm going to transform this by rotating it around that center. We're going to rotate 90 degrees. And then I'm going to translate. So this is kind of like a two-step. I'm going to take this and translate it by this vector, but I'm going to use this vector to move around. I want it to fit right there. And I can see that that went down 4 units. So this final one here, I could even color it green just to make it look a little better. And this middle one, let's color it like a black. So it starts out blue, rotates to black, translates down to green. So that's a rotate 90 degrees and then translate down. All right, so how could we get this to be in one of these rules? Well, I remember that rotate, I swapped the x and y, so y0, x0. But one of them was negative, and it looks like the x is negative in this case. Nope. This one right here is negative. Okay, so that gets me to there, but then I need to shift down, and here's where it gets hard, and you try to think about this as x and y, but you really try to think about it as horizontal or vertical. The first number is horizontal. Even though it says y, we swapped the x and y. The first number is always your left and right. The second number is your up and down. So I want to take that up and down and shift it down 4. Aha, I lined it up. And you can kind of see it if I step it out here. It goes down 4 units. And that gets me lined up just right. So my xy becomes negative y, comma, x minus 4. And my words to describe what happened is a rotate 90 degrees clockwise and then translate down 4 units. All right, we got one more, and I think it's probably a little bit easier than that last one. That last one was rather hard. Let's refresh our tool. Let's zoom in on what we see here. So if I click edit, it makes it a little bit bigger. All right, here's my figure O. The blue one goes to the green. So I need to make O become negative 8 and 5 right there. And then we have negative 5, 8. And this is 1 unit over. And then these come straight down to negative 4, 2. And I don't, it's only 4 corners, so I'm just going to put this one kind of in the middle of 2 other points so it keeps that same shape. All right, now when I look at this one, it looks like it flipped down and then slid. And if you're not sure like how that would work, you could always take a picture of like this little piece here. Or even easier, I could use this polyline tool. And let's undo that. So I'm going to do polyline, and I can click on these corners. And if I flip it, so I'm going to flip it vertically, and that would bring it down here. Right there. And then I would translate it over this way. So that's kind of showing me if I flip it there and then translate it, that's what I need to get. Okay. So I'm going to take this object, I'm going to transform it by reflecting across that horizontal axis, across the x-axis. And then I'm going to translate it. Let's see if I can get my vector in there. I'm going to click on this, transform, translate. I'm going to choose this vector. But now I'm going to change this vector so it fits it a little bit better. So it's going to start on that corner, and it comes over to 3. And that would be that looks like the right picture there. And if you're not sure, like, is it hitting the right number, you could zoom in and see, like, yep, it hits at 3, -2. And I noticed that this is a +7. All right, so let's try and match that up. So I know that my x direction is going to be a +7. My y direction doesn't really fit there, but I see that I have a +7 in the x direction, and it reflects across the x-axis, which was a -y. There we go. And so now it fits directly in there. Let's take a picture of this finished product. Oh, we didn't really have to take a picture because we already have the picture. But this is going to be x +7, comma, -y. And if we try to figure out what the two moves were, we did a reflect over the x-axis, and we did a translate right 7 units. There we go. Awesome. Great. All right, now all those updates will be available in the document that you make a copy of, including this updated version of the tool, so it allows you to easily reflect, whereas before it didn't really. All right, thank you, and good luck.